Welcome to another edition of the ROTL Lions UK podcast. I'm Matthew Cerner here with my co-host Anthony Fitzpatrick, and as you can see, we've got a very special guest with us for a very quick interview. He was the first round pick for Detroit, the 10th overall pick in 1991, 10 years with the Lions, 3-time first team All-Pro, 1-time second team All-Pro, four Pro Bowls, 2-time NFL reception leader, prior to the Lions inductee and creator of Lions Nation Unite. Herman Moore is in the building. Thank you so much for joining us, man. Really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. I appreciate it. You know, it's always good for us to chat. I enjoy it. Thanks again for having me. Good seeing you, fellas.
Yeah, fantastic. And just to kick us off, I mentioned Lions Nation Unite. It's something that we always try and plug in every video that we do, and the guys that are watching along live now have probably heard me harp on about that before. So they know what it is. It's this place where these kind of mega fan content creators come along and join up to create this amazing content, not from the sort of paid media's angle, but this sort of really in-depth, passionate hobbyists. So that's what it is now. What I'm really interested in is about the long-term aspect of the project. This is where we are, and it's going to become big just as it is. But where do you see the project going in the future? What do you want it to become?
Well, I really want it to become what I started out. I didn't realize this. I'll go back just a sec. So starting out playing for the Detroit Lions, I got to know over my tenure and over my time with the Lions, there it is, respecting the roar, that it was a very passionate fan base. And then after I retired and I started hanging out with more of those fans, I started realizing there wasn't really a hub for it. And it wasn't a hub other than going to the Lions, Detroit Lions personal website, or you're having to go to these other pockets here and there. But I was like, man, there's this vision of how do we bring them all together and how do we make it so that they can collaborate and also bring their fans together and their followers together in one location. So that's where Lions Nation was developed. And the whole vision is just to continue to grow that to where we can have those opportunities, like when you're over here and we're meeting up, there's opportunity to say, you know, you feel like you already know those people. And then you're already like-minded. It's a great way to just continue to communicate, to bring this nation a lot further together. So that's really the long-term vision. And then also, how do we continue to make it to where it's a value for those that are contributing the time, for those that are contributing the content, and then for those who just really want to support it. And philanthropy, I always talked about how that's a big part of it, making sure we give back to our communities, making sure that we give back to charitable causes. So that's really where I see it going long-term and having sustainability.
And
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, you can see it here already. You know, you got Lions fans over here in the UK. A lot of Detroit fans don't even know that we exist here at all. But, you know, that's what Lions Nation Unite can do for us. And again, thank you for it. And thank you for these lovely shirts. They're absolutely wonderful. Do love them. So obviously, moving on from that now, we'll talk a little bit about the Lions, I guess. Obviously, the season is now approaching its conclusion. There's just 4 games left. How are you feeling about this season on the whole? And just how happy were you the other week when Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes managed to get that first win under the belt right at the death?
You know, it felt good as an alum to see that this was a team that finally we could go somewhere and say, you know what, we've at least won our first game. You know, I thought it was a great way to turn the page somewhat for this team. There were a few things that I was hoping that would come out of it. One would be that once they won, whenever that would occur, that it would be less celebration, because I don't want to celebrate the fact that, you know, it's one win. I think you draw more attention to it than just really saying what it is. And that is just, you know, you're moving the page and you don't have to face that 0-16-1 season any longer. You can now say we can move on from that conversation. But, you know, I really want to see this team focus on where does this future go? Who are the players that are going to be contributors going down the line? I know they're still trying to bring the offensive side together, both in the coaching side and the player side. So how do you bring that and make sure that that's solid? They've lost a lot of players to injury. And we're hoping that we can start to finally see what this team looks like, because it's a young team and it's one that hasn't played together for a long time. We're going to have to, unfortunately, write off this year, but next year, I think it's going to be a really make or break season. for a lot of the players and potentially for some of the coaches.
So, in terms of your preseason expectations, how does it differ from what's actually happened on the field so far? Were your hopes a lot higher than this, or kind of did you have a look at what happened in Stafford going and think actually maybe this is going to be a bad year and it was about where you expected?
I thought it was going to be a much better year. I think we all did. I don't think any of us thought they were going to go postseason and make it to the playoffs. But I think we felt that there would be some games that they probably will win that they shouldn't win. And then they were going to lose games that were winnable. But it was going to give them an opportunity to have something to build on. And it just turned out to be pretty disastrous. I don't think anyone can try and make lemonade out of those lemons. You can, but let's call it what it is. It's been a bad year. And I think that as long as we live in the reality of where this team is and the team itself and the owners live into the reality that they got to get better. The players have to play better. They have to make sure they're drafting the right players that are ready to play or that can be developed, and that they got the right personnel to coach them up. And as long as that's always being held, the accountability is being held there, then this is a team that can get better, but it won't unless those things are in place. And they have to develop true leaders on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. Typically, that's your quarterback, but we've seen the play of Jared Goff, and I don't think right now the team sees him, as the leader as much as a valuable piece and an important piece for this team to go further.
Well, just maybe to expand on that a bit, obviously Goff was the big, let's say, acquisition over the summer, moving on from Stafford. He's the first quarterback, new one here in a long time. How do you feel about him after his first year? Obviously, the contract was restructured to give us room to work, but sort of tied him to us maybe for a few years. How are you feeling in regards to him? And do you think that maybe with additions over the summer that he might get better next year, or will we maybe see some of the same again?
I think it will get better. I think the more people you put around him, what I see in Jared Goff is this: his confidence seems to grow when you put more tools around him. As the receiving unit, when Josh Reynolds and you get, you have Raymond and Ross St. Brown and those guys are stepping up. He all of a sudden seemed to be a little bit different in these past few games in terms of his confidence. Once he started to see he had some home run threats, or he had a little bit more versatility in the playbook, that's what I see. This was a guy, we have to remind people, that was part of a trade. So it wasn't like he had really an option where he was going to go. It was part of a swap between the two teams, and he ended up in Detroit. He didn't pick Detroit. Detroit took him as part of a pact that they made with the Rams. So here, is he the right fit? Time will tell. I think he's learned that the fan base here is very hard, because we've had a history, with the exception of Matthew Stafford, of not really having long-term quarterbacks that really amounted to anything. And they definitely haven't turned out to be playoff caliber. So I think he can get better. It's going to take the players around him. I like the fact that he has a good running game. I like the fact that they have a really good offensive line when they're healthy. The tight end and the skill position are getting to be a little bit more solid as they play longer. So this is going to be a good offensive unit as long as they can keep everybody healthy.
Looking to perhaps some positives from this season, because there have been a lot of negative we've already discussed, but potentially I might highlight this draft class. We've had a lot of production from pretty much all of the guys that we've drafted, and even some of the guys who started a bit slower, like Levi, have started perhaps to up their production as we've gone on. Do you see it that way as well? I mean, Saul's really come into his own in the last few games, especially.
Yeah, they've gotten some production on the offensive side, on the defensive side, and primarily, the skilled players have kind of stepped up and produced in areas. But where I see this draft and future drafts getting better is going to be on how they develop these talented players. They have to get better. They can't stay where they are, and the production they do even this year, even if they play well. Let's pick players who play well. If they still have to play better next year, and that's going to mean they have to grow and develop. The coaching staff has to trust them more. They have to develop them and put them in positions that sometimes is going to be uncomfortable. When they go certain coverages or they go certain schemes that going to stretch those players a little bit more to have to step up. And that's going to be a determining factor in terms of how quickly can the Lions turn the corner versus where they are now is in that component as well.
So yeah, maybe to move on to that, you talk about turning around the corner. Then obviously you've been a player for a lot of your career, not so much on the management side, but I guess as a player, when you would finish a season, you would have your own views sort of on what had gone right, what had gone wrong, what you would want to see in that off season coming up to make your team better. I mean, after what you've seen this year, if you were sort of in the GM position there, what would you want to see in terms of improvements for next season? Maybe something you do over the off season in the draft, etc. What would you want to see improved?
Well, one, I would want them to continue to work on depth at long-term positions, one being the quarterback position. I think there needs to be a focus in there, even though you got Jared Goff and he's kind of in the middle of, what you would consider a quarterback. He's not he's not a beginning quarterback, and he's not, I think, that real well-seasoned quarterback like you see with, like an Aaron Rodgers or someone like that. But I think he still has the ability to turn into a nice long-term solution. But if he doesn't, you got enough young talent there to start making sure you solidify the quarterback position, which is very important. The other one is to continue to look at depth across the defensive line. I'm looking at this team saying, how do you continue to apply pressure to make your secondary and your linebackers better? You got young linebackers that are stepping up. You got Barnes in there, and he's trying to come along, and you're bringing some of these guys along. You got the secondary that also has some youth, and they're trying to learn and kind of gel. So if you look at a couple areas, that's what I'm looking to focus on in the short term. But in the long term, I think it's going to pay dividends for them. And if I'm evaluating this, there's a couple things I would look at to say we got to look at a little bit better. How did the coaches come together? This was a year of first-year coaches that weren't like most coaching staffs that came all in one bunch together from one similar location or a similar team. This was a coaching staff that came from different places, and it was placed together. So just like the team had to gel, the coaches had to gel. I also look and say, with Coach Campbell, I'm evaluate him as a new head coach. There's some things he did really, really well. I think like getting the team to play together, keeping the locker room from having a lot of grumblings and falling apart, being that they were 0-10, 0-11, whatever. And then looking at this as being coaches didn't start to fall apart either and start blaming players. So he did some great things. The things that kind of fell apart was sometimes letting his emotions get into play when it came into some of the play calling at critical times. Even though you may not be playing for certain things, you set the example of how to manage a game. And then the other one was, really, I don't know if I agree with the switch in play calling between he and Coach Lynn, the offensive coordinator, because it's the first year. And I get it, but you might want to ride that one out to the end of the year, make your adjustments behind the scene, because it builds trust and it builds loyalty and confidence that the coach has got your back, both as the coaching side and the player side. So if I had to look at that, and I'm the owner, I'm the GM, I'm looking at it going, okay, that's my evaluation. I give you, C minus, somewhere around there, D plus. Only because you got to win. That's what you're there to brought in for. Two, what keeps you above water is the fact that you held the locker room together. But everything else, I think, it wasn't what you would expect at the NFL level.
Just want to take a moment now to recognize the people that are watching on live, asking some questions. Thank you so much for joining us. Actually, what you were just talking about feeds into a question we just had from Det Fan Man. He says, how does MCDC compare to another player-friendly coach in Coach Fonts, who you obviously played under?
Yeah, with Coach Fonts, it was different in that we had a team full of leaders. You had a lot of different Pro Bowlers. When I came in, we had players who were all pro, and we also had the best running back on the planet. And when you have some things to kind of have as a foundation, that's one thing. Yeah, we rotated out some offensive coordinators to get it together, but he never really had to dismember and dismantle the entire the entire coaching staff. It wasn't until later, for some reason, when we started getting into the cap numbers, that they have to kind of tear it all apart. And then that's when he also was his demise and he had to leave. But players coach, let us lead, took the blame for everything we did in public, but behind scenes, he was pretty hard. He was pretty firm, and he held us accountable. And it was a really good relationship when you talk about that player coach. A lot of people think we hear player coach, and I'll be short on this, is that it means the coach just lets the players do whatever they want. That's not the case. A player's coach means that there's loyalty and respect on both sides, that he respected us as men, he respected us as professionals, and then we respected him and his coaching staff back as leaders of getting us set up and making sure we were positioned in the right place to play. So that's what we see more as a player coach.
Just running out of a little bit of time, we've got a few questions that we had from some of our listeners in advance. So, Ant, if you want to kick off with one of your favourite ones, because I don't think we'll get through them all.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I was just say you were talking about, when you arrived, sort of the players you had in the locker room there, the team you had. I mean, is there sort of a favourite game that sticks out to you, during your career in general or in that period where you had like Barry, etc. there? Is there still one that really sticks with you to this day?
Yeah, it really still goes back to our one playoff win against the Dallas Cowboys at home. That was my first NFL touchdown, right corner of the end zone, fade route. I think it was third down. And
you think?
And we beat them up. And I never lost against Dallas during my entire career, even though they won a couple of Super Bowls. And so it was one of those few teams I never lost to.
Rob Wastoney on WhatsApp asked, what was the funniest locker room antic you saw during your career? I don't know if it's a family-friendly thing to say, perhaps, but
well, I'll give you this one, and for what it's worth, your listeners will enjoy this, and I'll keep it very PG. But we had just lost the game, and I think I didn't have any passes thrown to me, nor did I, get really any love from the coaching staff, and that would be hard to understand, especially if you're the leading receiver in the NFL. And we were going against nobody. I mean, there was no defensive secondary guy that was shutting me down. So I was pretty upset. And Robert Porcher was on the other side. And that typically, anyone who's seen the real movies with the locker room, you wear your towel and you're trying to get ready to shower. This before the cameras were allowed in the locker room. So, all your guys are in towels, and the coach says, bring it up. We bring it up. And at that time, Robert Porcher screamed for me to come over, and I wouldn't come over right away because I was just trying to get my head together so I could bring the right attitude to the team thing. And I said, I'll be over there when I get there, basically. And Robert Porcher said something back to me. We yelled at one another, and all of a sudden I saw this 300-pound lineman running from the other side of the locker room full steam at me to come and fight me, and with no towel. And and yeah, so that I jumped up out of panic. So I lost my towel. And then all of a sudden, no one wanted to, if we were going to engage, nobody was going to break up that fight. Let's just say that. It was, so we both quickly realized that this was probably not a good idea. So it turned back into a shouting match, and we picked up our towels and continued on. So
maybe got time for one more, Ant, quickly.
Just in terms of obviously modern day NFL now, I don't know how much you watch, but looking back on your own career, is there a receiver you see in the league now that reminds you of yourself back when you were playing, whether it be, the routes he runs on the pitch, the attitude, the style of play, is there anyone you think, I see a little bit of me in him?
The guy I would say closely resembles is Mike Evans, who plays with Tampa Bay, a guy who's been ultra consistent. He's been 1,000-yard plus receiver every year he's been in the league. And even though he's playing with Tom Brady, he's playing on great teams, you don't hear his name mentioned among the elites quite often, but he has been one of the most consistent players. He's a big receiver. He makes plays. He's always double-digit touchdowns, and he quietly gets it done. And so he's one that I look at, and it reminds me of my career because mine was very much like that, to where Jerry Rice, Michael Irvin, Chris Carter, even though, I was the number one receiver at that time, and for about a 5-year period, it was always those. You hear the other names, so I can kind of feel for him. But he's a great receiver.
I mean, it's so true, because even this season, Cooper Kupp is the one getting all the love, and he has been fantastic. But I think it's because he's a short, little receiver that you kind of don't expect everything from. Whereas Mike Evans is second in receiving touchdowns this year, and yet how many times have you heard your name? So I totally understand that. Just to close out here, just want to give the floor to you to speak on anything you want to say, maybe about Lions Nation Unite or about any of your other endeavors, because I know you've got a lot going on at Team 84. So.
Yep. Well, with us, as always, first and foremost, I want to wish everyone, regardless of where you are, a a wonderful holiday season, wherever it may be, at part of wherever you're located, but also to be thankful for everything that we have. I mean, I always say that sports brings a lot of people together, a lot of cultures, a lot of races, ethnicities, but be thankful for who we are and the help that we have. And I just appreciate you. I appreciate you guys for having me on. I appreciate your fans for giving us the opportunity and giving you the platform and the voice, and to having that listener base. And as far as Lions Nation Unite, can't do it without you. Can't do it without your content and your followers as well. So from the bottom of my heart, I want to say thank you as a former player for the support, and thank you for all that you do. And other than that, that's it. Lions Nation Unite. Continue to follow us and check us out, and download the app if you get a chance, and just participate on our platform. That's it. Easy.
Yes. Yeah, you got to do that. It's a great place. So many good things, including, I think it's just the end now of Detroit Lions podcasts, St. Jude auction. There's loads of signed merch on there that you can get. They've raised over $35,000 this year, and I think over 100 in total in the 3 years they've been doing this, or something to that effect. I think there's the last few minutes of it going. If you want to do that, please log on to them. You can find them on the Lions Nation Unite app. Otherwise, we just did our college football podcast a couple of hours ago. Please go and have a look at that. Episode number 17, I think, now looking ahead to the bowl games happening at New Year's Eve and kind of just before, I think, isn't it, Anne? Otherwise, we have Jeremy Reisman, the editor-in-chief of Pride of Detroit, on with us tomorrow for the preview podcast for the Cardinals game. So please join us for that. Otherwise, just remains for me to thank my co-host, Anthony Fitzpatrick, to Herman Moore. Thank you so much. We can't say enough about you coming on, so that's really great. To the listeners, to the viewers, thank you so much to you too. We'll see you again tomorrow. But for now, let's go Lions, one pride.
One pride.
One pride.